He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with over 26 years of experience. Together, we're the Brief Brothers. We love talking about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. Today, Henry, we've got another great guest from the UK. Her name is Charlotte Mair, and we're going to introduce her when we get the conversation going. So let's take a listen. We're back with another episode, and I am delighted to introduce you, everyone, all of our viewers, all 150, 160 of our viewers, to Charlotte Mair. I hope I've said your name right, Charlotte Mair?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Charlotte is visiting the United States from the UK, where she makes her home. Charlotte came to my attention last year, as a matter of fact, when you were named by Ad Age as one of the top young women in marketing. And that may not be the exact name of the award that or the recognition that you earned, but it was, I think, a major feather in your cap, to use an American phrase, to have been picked out, selected by Ad Age as being a thought leader, a major presence in our industry. And I read an article about you, and just your attitude and your story, your backstory, just I thought would resonate with a lot of the folks in our industry over here. And so I said, I'm going to reach out to you, and you're here. So first of all, before we dive into our conversation, let me just say, welcome to the Brief Brothers, Charlotte. Thank you for joining us. We're grateful to have you.
Grateful to be here.
So let me dive into this story, because I think Henry's gonna get a kick out of this too, because we've talked to a lot of creatives, we've talked to industry leaders, we've talked to strategists and planners. What really drew me to your story was the way you said you got started. And I think if I get the figure right, it was 17 pounds 22 in your bank account, 22 pence. I don't know the currency, which is what, about 25 US dollars is what you had in your bank account when you started Fitting Room, which is the name of is it an ad agency or a marketing agency?
So we've actually just finished a big piece of repositioning work, and we're actually, the execution of work is the marketing, but I would say that we're a culture communications agency. Okay.
Well, no, that distinguishes you as well. We talked to a lot of ad agency folks, right? And I thought it'd be kind of fun to spread our wings and talk to someone a little bit outside the normal hallways, to use another phrase, that we usually talk to. So you started with basically 25 bucks in your pocket.
Yeah.
And now you were the founder and the managing director of the Fitting Room.
Yeah.
So for those of our audience who don't really know as much about you as we think they should, tell us a little bit about this. You started with almost basically nothing in your pocket, and you built this company. Tell us about that. We want to hear.
Yeah, I think this might be controversial. I think one of the things about being a minority is that you have a whole different level of hustle. You have a whole different level of mindset. You're raised not to be expecting anything, right? So when you don't expect anything, you have to turn the fuck up every time to win, right? Nothing's coming for you, right? And from birth, you're going to have to work 10 times harder than everybody else. That is programmed into your mind. So if you want to get to a certain level of table, there's no one else that's going to get you there but yourself. And I think that that's one of the things that I love about being Black, is that I have a different level of resilience and get up and go, because I've never felt like anybody, the world, anything owes me anything. So looking at 17 quid, it could have been 17 pence and it wouldn't have made any difference to the mindset of how do I get from A to B? I'm from a very entrepreneurial family. My parents run their own companies. My dad will kind of let you get to about 26. And then he says, oi, when are you starting your own company? And that's been the same for there's 4 of us now, family. My little sister's 22 and she's already getting ready to launch her first jewelry line, and she's still studying. But myself and my 2 brothers, we all run our own companies. And I think that resilience and that focus that's driven into us from such a young age for me, you know, I dropped out of university, and I remember again my dad saying to me, kiddo, that's what you want to do, that's fine, but you are going to have to graft, because you are now putting yourself even further down the bottom of the pile. Because at the time, you know, I'm a millennial, it was you get a degree, and as a Black family, if your parents can afford for you to get a degree, you go and get the degree. But I was a grafter. You know, I was at university doing about 3 different work experiences. I was studying other courses for what I wanted to get into. I was watching far too many episodes of Sex and the City that was making me believe that I could be Samantha Jones and I could be this publicist running around New York. And pop culture really, really influenced me. And my mum said to me a few weekends ago, God, I'm so glad you turned that knowledge of culture into a business that you love, because all I'm doing every day is consuming what I would have been doing if I'd had a normal 9 to 5. So I think the money thing, and actually, to my younger brother, AJ, he'd worked for me at my agency for about 4.5 years. When lockdown hit, we were in the 2nd week of it, and he was on a walk, and he'd always wanted a food business. And I said to him, yo, like, now let's go and do it. And he was like, no, you know, there's no this. And I was like, no, it's actually the perfect time. No one can get food deliveries. We know how you get access to food. People are in their homes, but they're still looking for something. How can we bring some joy? So we came up with this idea called Barbecue in a Box. Now, his business probably cost us about 50, 60 quid to get off the ground. And basically what we did was we started delivering food to people in boxes, right? Well, actually the first lot that went out were in bags. We didn't even have boxes because we couldn't get to them. But we made it all about like our heritage and our roots, to do with kind of barbecue, spices, everything from the Caribbean islands. And we put it into meats, and we did like the Caribbean slaw and all of that. And then it kind of really like blew up in lockdown. And then what happened was, when it came to winter, a celebrity went on a TV show in the UK called I'm a Celebrity, and a contact of ours bought a box for this celebrity family while his wife was in I'm a Celebrity. And he posted one day on Instagram, and the whole damn thing blew up, thousands and thousands.
Oh, wow.
It was insane.
That's great.
I've been in, you know, part of my company does PR, and I got a tip off that we were going to be locked down for Christmas. And I said to my little brother, right, launch Christmas in a Box for all those people that were at home alone. Sold out. Absolute madness. He now runs that company full time. He's got a barn on a farm out in the countryside. He's just done boxes for Vodafone, for Wimbledon. He's doing insane things for big brands. And that's what I mean. Like, we don't see the barrier there because we're used to barriers being there. You just kind of run through it. And what will be, will be. And my dad always said to me, the worst that happens is you run up a little bit of debt and you have to move home for a little bit. He was like, that's the actual reality of the worst. And actually, when you put it like that, and I think if people thought about it like that, the fear of what you're about to do would be kind of removed, because it is just living in reality. We call it fear, but it's actually just, you know, the edge of living, which is where we should all actually operate on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. I think though, some people, there's a fear of failure, but there's also, I think, and this is a lot more complex and deeper, is the fear of success, right? Is that what happens if I do this, and am I going to become there's that uncertainty of knowing, you know, what the future holds. I think some people just prefer to have the safe and secure and not have to worry about those things. But you mentioned something interesting, which is the hustle that being a minority confers upon you. And I two things. One is I find the parallel between your story and the story of the founder of our agency very intriguing, because the founder of our agency was a woman. She was a Cuban refugee who was a high school graduate, also had no college degree, who was living in Miami, who got a job as a secretary in an ad agency, and within 10 years founded her own ad agency in 1972, you know, in a time when women didn't do that, you know. And so I think that it's certainly true among immigrant cultures as well. You know, it's like, it's a self-selecting group of people that have decided, I need to make this big change in my life in order to have a better life. And therefore they're willing to put that hustle in and do that. But it's a fantastic story. And the barbecue in a box is amazing.
Yeah. And it sounds to me, Charlotte, like you and your family are doing, you used the word, you blew up the internet. You're doing more than just blowing up the internet. You're busting down walls, busting down barriers. I love, you said something about fuck fearless, fuck fear, and fuck ceilings. By the way, you can say fuck all you want here. I never said. Henry says it all the time. But no, it's that attitude that I think really makes you stand out. And it seems to me that you've kind of, whether you wanted to or not, you've kind of become a role model. Would you say that's true?
I think that I don't think I realized probably until the last 6 months some of the impact that I was having until people started writing to me about stuff. And I have never, because, you know, I'm still, as I said, I'm still fucking up on a daily basis. Like, you know, this is after COVID, like running an agency is no clean slate, whether you're booked and busy or struggling to get work, like they're one of the same in reality. So I always try and, you know, somebody wrote to me last week who, ironically, back in the day, she was at this agency that I wanted to work at. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. She then set up her own agency and she wrote to me on Instagram and said, you know, can I get some advice? Can I get some help? And I was like, yeah. And I wrote back to her and I said, don't get it twisted. Everyone is struggling right now. You know, cost of living, everyone is making decisions that they know when they go to bed at night are either absolutely spot on or fucking wrong. So I was like, don't sweat what LinkedIn is telling you. Don't let the noise distract you. Veteran agency people are making big decisions at the moment of what the next 12 months looks like. And I think it's only been recently that I've been, you know, I guess the flip side of being a minority is I never really wanted to put myself out there. So actually up until lockdown as a business, we didn't even have a website. We had a holding page. We had enough referral work for me to not have to think about, right, we've got to go out and get work. COVID hit, we had 85% of our business was hospitality. So all of our venues were closed within 24 hours. A lot of money was owed to us. Our secondary revenue stream was kind of music and entertainment. All shows were cancelled, couldn't do any live events. So when I look back at that £17.22, actually what happened during COVID was kind of more significant because I then had something to lose. The £17.22, there was nothing to lose. There was just me in a dream. So it's kind of a different mindset as to how you adapt to that. But I think with being a minority, just to circle back to your point, you're more aware of putting your head above, right? And letting people have an opinion on you. Like a lot of the world right now is about personal branding and everything else, which is a lot easier for a white person to do because it doesn't come with all the assumptions. Like as a Black woman, it's like, oh, she's a bit aggressive. She's a bit full of herself. There are all these kind of stereotype connotations that come with when you put yourself out there. So up until lockdown, I hadn't done that. I'd always declined press interviews. It was not my thing. I'd occasionally put a quote to a piece of work that we would do, but I didn't really have an opinion on it. When lockdown hit and I was like, shit, okay, we better get to plan B, plan C, and plan D. One of those things meant, okay, I better get a bit of a voice out there and a bit of an opinion out there. And that's actually where the Ad Age piece was born. I wrote to all the editors and introduced myself of things that I never, ever thought would come back to me. And like EJ, the news editor at Ad Age, wrote back and was like, oh my God, great to be connected. And I got such a response. It was a little bit overwhelming. And I went on and did my first podcast interview with PR Moment. Up until then, I hadn't looked up because I was like, oh, you know, can't really talk until we're turning over 5 million. I'd kind of put all of these sort of barriers in place in my head of what running a successful agency looked like and what I had to hit to be a part of that conversation. So the role model piece, only if you knew me, you knew me, but if you didn't, you wouldn't. And you probably just think, oh shit, where the hell did this woman come from? But actually been in the game for a fair bit of time, was just kind of doing it quite quietly.
I was going to ask you about that. So you talked about starting the business. Was there, between like being in college and leaving college and starting the business, was there anything that happened in between? Like, did you work at other agencies? How did you?
I worked at an internal comms agency for about 10 months. And actually, when I told the two founders of that I was leaving, they were very supportive. They gave me office space. Their office is in Shoreditch. They let me keep my work laptop to keep my costs down. And they turned my salary into my first retainer. So that was quite spectacular. Wow. And my former two bosses that I'd been at before, where I was in-house in venues and events agencies, they hired me as their publicist as well. So I had always, you know, as I talk about being a minority, like you navigate through this world in a very specific way. So I never leave a mess, right? That whole terminology of blaze a trail and leave a mess, that is the absolute opposite to me. I tidy as I go so that there can never be any kind of reputation damage. I'm very across, you know, there are a few fuck ups that happen that people just feel a certain way and you can't do anything about that. But 9 times out of 10, that's kind of how we move. That's how we move as a family. We're very kind of across that operation of what we sort of put out.
I'm amazed at the parallels between you and the founder of our agency, because she used to say, I started this agency with a typewriter and a telephone and borrowed office space, which was exactly the case. She had like a retainer of a few $100s a month from one client, was her first client. So amazing. Sorry about that, Howard.
No, that's okay. You know, Henry and I, we really don't talk about the challenges of minorities in this business. It's no surprise to either Henry or to you, Charlotte, that historically it's been pretty white. And when I first started the business, I saw women, but that was pretty much the extent of it. Yeah. So do you feel that, Henry and I both know that you are kind of a shy, retiring personality, Charlotte, but do you think now that you've made these strides, and I know you're one person, you're not the only minority out there doing some good stuff, but do you think that your personality has actually come to be an advantage? You're knocking down doors, you're knocking down barriers, and people are seeing what you can do.
Yeah, and I guess as well, like the first part of this conversation, we focus a lot on the minority piece because that's a part of the story. But I actually don't pay a lot of attention to that, if I was being honest, in how I operate on a day-to-day basis. We talk about having big dick energy, and that is like white, brown, like black, whatever. That's how we go into any situation. So my color is a part of me, but it isn't me, and I definitely don't let it hold me back in that way. And I guess where we are as a society right now, Black culture, hip hop, whatever you want to bracket it under, is driving the majority of pop culture that is shifting trends. The subcultures that are coming through are subcultures driven by sub-communities that are minorities. Now, you might want to get to the forefront of that and repackage that and make it look like it came from sort of the white world, but fundamentally it didn't. It was driven by most things, actually hip hop. That is the trainers that you buy, the sweats that you wear, the headphones that you put in, all of those things have been touched by hip hop. Now, being raised in, if you ask my dad, like, what did I give my 4 kids? He would say, I gave them an education and I taught them how to navigate through a white world. And those are the 2 biggest things that as a minority you can be given. So when I walk into a boardroom with anybody, I'm not walking in there going, oh my God, I'm Black victim. I'm walking in there and going, how the fuck do I get this deal over the line? The same as a white old dude. And I think as well, like with all of this sort of D&I agenda, we've started to kind of miss the point of what diversity and inclusion was meant to do outside of kind of the moral standing of it. Like I always say, I'm like, old white dudes are like my favorite people. I have the best relationships with them. We have the best conversations. I don't attack them for what they are born into and everything else, but we talk about cool shit. They ask me questions that maybe they wouldn't feel so comfortable asking other people, because I know that world. I went to all white schools. Like that has been my life. I actually had a different challenge of how I sort of integrated into the Black community. It was a very different thing for me. So the work side of it was always that bit easier. But yeah, as I say, like I know the barriers and shit that hits me because I'm Black, but I do just kind of chop through it because I don't really care. Like I'm on this earth for the same amount of time as anybody else. Yes, it's harder, cool, but there's shit to be done.
Let's back up a minute here, because I don't know how many people over here know what it is that you do in the fitting room. And it is a cool story. The article I read said that one of the things you ask is, what would Jay-Z do? And I quite frankly don't know many people who would use that as a measuring stick. And then you said, if Diddy didn't do this, maybe we shouldn't do it either. So again, I kind of pat myself on the back that I even know who those people are. I'm an old white guy. I'm 65 years old. I've had a Black girlfriend, so I'm not completely out of touch.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend to be any kind of, hip hop expert.
Yeah.
But tell us about the fitting room and what is it that you do, and that has shaped clearly a lot of the influence that you've had in our industry.
I think that the Jay-Z thing was actually a specific project. So just after Black Lives Matter happened, the big marches and everything else, a guy in the UK that used to be in a garage group in London started posting about how he was going to launch a Black Pound Day that was going to be all about encouraging people to spend black the first Saturday of every month. And it came up on my Instagram Explore page. And basically I hit up one of our clients, one of the co-presidents at Sony, and said like, yo, we should back this. And he wrote back saying, what should we do? And I wrote back saying, what would Jay-Z do? And he said, what would he do? And I said he'd take out billboards, he'd make film content, and like listed off all of the kind of marketing objectives and channels that we could deliver. And that's where the strategy came for that. Jay-Z is somebody that in the community and thereafter represents somebody who came from nothing and built up an extreme level of wealth, navigated through very specific rooms to be able to launch brands like Douce, you know, the stuff that he's got separate to kind of the music side. And actually, when you look at him and his numbers, the bulk of his money comes from brand, not from selling music. And he's very smart in that way. And the same with Diddy, right? As to, you know, if you think he took 51% of Ciroc, took Ciroc from being 12th in the category to 2nd in the category, through purely understanding culture and understanding why people buy what they buy. In The American Office, there's a really great scene where Dwight has set up a gym and he says, I know how to get people on board. First of all, you've got to get the black people do it. Then the white people come, then you've got to stop the black people from doing it. And whilst people don't like that analogy, it's actually very true, which is why so many people end up being called culture vultures, because they take at the beginning, they use the culture to make shit pop, and then they want the culture removed. And actually, if you look at the principles of some of those big hip hop stars, that's what they've done. You know, I talk about Biggie a lot because Biggie is a master marketeer. He took brands like Cristal, Timberland, Kith, and made them the legacy brands that they are. And that was like 1995. That is the influence of hip hop. So a lot of people don't know, like I sat in a meeting with a CEO and he had these Adidas trainers on. And I gave him the breakdown of how those trainers came to being on his feet. And he was like, holy shit. You know, I think that is, as an agency, that's probably what we do. Because I didn't know where I belonged, I'm obsessed with knowing where shit comes from and building out that story for brands, thinking about it from a cultural perspective and a community perspective. And that's what TFR really does. So we used to be called PR and everything in between. We rebranded in 2017, The Fitting Room. And this was after a big music guy gave me a book called The Tanning of America to read. The Tanning of America is by a guy called Steve Stout. Steve is a music and business mogul. I've literally just been at his office today down in Brooklyn. And he was one of the people involved in negotiating some of the biggest hip hop deals. He was the person that was always he was the conduit between commercials and culture. So he could be in the project, but then he could walk into the boardroom at Apple and negotiate a deal. And that was his kind of perfect sweet spot. So I read that book and was like, right, rip up everything that we know in the UK and let's get back to this kind of thinking and this kind of approach. So I came up with the name, The Fitting Room, and it was all about when you go out shopping or whatever, and you want to try a new look, or you want to do something a bit different, or you've realized that you're having a little bit of an identity crisis or whatever, the place where we all end up is the fitting room, right? We take this new outfit that we want to try on for a new fit, to try something new. It might be, oh, I want a different kind of boyfriend. I'm fed up with dealing with these fuck boys. I'm going to start dressing like this to attract a different man, right? That is actually brand. That's your personal brand. So with the fitting room, the idea was that you came into the fitting room, we undressed you, and we redressed the brand with a fit for whatever you were trying to attract in that moment. And that can come from transformation, repositioning, customer acquisition. It was all of those things. And you can apply those in a really simple way to how we operate as humans. So that was kind of the first thing, was the name. It was like, okay, that's what we do. That's how we do it. And the second thing was about like, how can we take the principles of hip hop and modern culture and blend them with old marketing methods? So we trademarked a couple of years ago, hype, demand, and legacy. And I just wrote about this actually for a LinkedIn post for next week. So hype is essentially your awareness phase rewrapped. Demand is your sales, your funnel, your conversion rewrapped. And your legacy is the memory that you create so someone comes back to revisit and rebuy. So those were what we then put around the fitting room of the principles of what we do. So when we talk to clients, we talk about, we create hype, demand, and legacy. And then we have a channel strategy that sits underneath each one of those once we've found the person's fit. So we know who they're talking to, where they should be talking, what the distribution looks like of that story of that person. So hip hop is weaved into the business from start to finish, but in the UK we don't have hip hop like you guys have hip hop in America, so it's a slightly different approach, but that's what was sort of born of the business. So when people give me a brief, I've got a bit of a reputation for ripping up briefs, because a lot of the time I think people don't actually know what they need, and my team are like, oh shit, she's about to rip it up, and I'll rewrite it based on consumer insights and what audiences are looking for. So people come to us and go, we need PR, and I'll be like, no, you don't need PR. You need a content strategy. You need an influencer strategy, and actually you need a peppering of PR. So let's look at that structure and that ecosystem for your brand slightly different once we've stripped it down and then redressed it. So we kind of sit, we're full service. We have, there's the team of us in London, 10, 12 people. And then there's our global network that allows me to be out in the US, connecting with people, creators and creatives and everything else to make client shit in the UK pop.
Henry, I think she's a strategist.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So when you came up with this idea, what was the hardest part about selling it?
I was 10 years ahead of the UK market. Definitely. So much of my inspiration had come from the US. So much had been, you know, we don't have the budgets of the US, right? We don't have the people, we don't have the volume of minorities to make shit cool in the way that you guys can do it in the US. So the beginning, I had to very much kind of water down my soul to get into certain rooms. We started off with hospitality because we kind of fell into it, but then I knew how, again, to take a hospitality brand and make it cool by repositioning it as a lifestyle brand, and how you use social media and influencers and everything else to kind of drive that hype, demand, and legacy. We're now, over the last year, 18 months, been starting to get into a lot of the big FMCG brands. And it's funny, again, like a lot of people on LinkedIn at the moment are writing, oh my God, my business is all inbound. I don't have to do anything to win work. Let me tell you, I do everything to win work. Every single day, I send 20 cold LinkedIn messages to different brands, right? They get our creds that have got the cover of it that is their brand, so each one is bespokely made. And I write a story for that brand specifically. So I don't do maths or anything. I have literally a list of 250, and I sit and I work my way through them on an Excel spreadsheet. And recently I've been able to secure meetings with some of the biggest brands, because they write back and they go, oh my God, Charlotte, we get so many messages every day. This is the one that was actually like bespoke to them. So I'll do a quick audit, understand the brand, look at where the challenges are, and then I will actively go after them. A lot of people look at me like, you're crazy, you shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, why wouldn't I do that? If that's the shit you want, whatever level you are, you're playing to win. But again, that's what I mean about fuck the fear. Like, I'm not scared of that. If I don't get a response, I don't get a response. And I've got other routes of revenue and ways of making money, but there are certain brands that I want to work with because I know we can tell such incredible stories for them. So I'm going to put myself in front of them and be like, hey, you know, this is some of the cool shit that we do. We'd love to create cool shit for you. And recently, you know, landed quite a few legacy brand meetings just by understanding their brand and presenting them something different. But 10 years ago, oh no, I would not have been able to use the methods that I'm using now, because the UK just wasn't ready for it. And there were sort of a lot of agencies that were white owned that kind of positioned themselves as black. You know, they had that slightly urban feel to it, the design, the look, the feel. And a lot of them kind of got called out actually during Black Lives Matter movement. And again, you know, Black Lives Matter, it was no secret. I didn't really speak on it because it wasn't my story at that time to tell. There were other black people and activists that could explain what had been going on a lot better than I could. So I stay out of those, you know, I'm if I need to, then I'll speak. But if I don't need to, I don't have an opinion on everything, because some days I've just got shit to do. So I don't get involved in every conversation.
Right. You know, Tyler, there was a post on LinkedIn today, not by Tyler Perry, but about Tyler Perry, who's, you know, a media mogul here in the United States, as I'm sure you know. And the guy who was writing about him was saying, you know, he took his own road. He did his own thing, like the way you're describing that you did for your business. And one of the things that he did that worked so well for him was that when he was putting together plays or writing scripts and for movies, he went to the black church. and he hired the women, in the choir. He hired these Black women.
Yeah.
And he started to develop an email list that today has over 400,000 names. So he has his own distribution network that he started with nothing.
Yeah.
Basically nothing. And it has allowed him to grow. He's, it said he's, I forget how many millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars he's worth.
Yeah.
And the guy said, and he's got about, $80 million worth of homes and toys. Right. But yeah, it's like we all know. I mean, I've seen a couple of Tyler Perry's movies, so I know who he is. He's a giant, and he knows what he's doing. He knew what he wanted.
Yeah.
And some people like what he does, and some people don't. That's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah.
But he took this principle of, I'm going to get everybody's email, and then he's going to, when he would take his thing to the next city, he'd say to the audience, send a text today to whoever you know in the next city that I'm coming, and let them know. And then he'd collect their email addresses. And that's how we built it up.
But that's the principles of hype, right? That's the principle of hype, demand, legacy. That story is being told now. That database has grown to what it is. That's the legacy. The demand is there because he took it to the people, and the hype was entering a specific space like the church, where he knew exactly how those women operated, because he understood how Black women operated as to what was going to drive his business. That's exactly where we talk about hype, demand, legacy, how you do it, and how you do it really bloody well.
Yeah, he actually took advantage of the fact that Black actors and actresses were not being hired by Hollywood, so he had access to them and got them into his plays and into his TV shows, and he's built this model. And I'm not here to talk about. I'm not trying to hype, Tyler Perry, but I'm just seeing a parallel here between your hustle and your resilience. I'm wondering what's next. What's your next ambition? What do you see for you in the next year, 5 years, 10 years? Where's this going?
Yeah, I think that we want to grow, like we want to do fast growth, starting over the next few months. We've got head of agency joining us at the end of September, which was a really crucial hire to sort of start to remove me from the day to day, so I can really get my head down on sales and marketing. So that's kind of crucial. Real growth in the FMCG space. We want to open offices abroad. We've got my dream was, I always said to my parents, I know I've done it when I have a New York office, when I've got a New York office that's profitable, and everyone keeps saying, do you know how hard it is to crack New York? And I'm like, £17.22. Like, I'm good with the hard. I'm not bothered about that bit. But I think we want to tell like just really fucking great stories. That's my whole energy is how you make stuff pop. And actually, just going back to the Tyler Perry thing, I always think of it as a bit like Kanye West. So when Kanye released his last album, he didn't actually speak. He got Justin LeBoy to put out one tweet that basically broke the internet and sent everybody into a tears. I don't think Kanye spoke on that album about it until he did Drink Champs, maybe like 6 weeks after its release. But that album was everywhere. He ended his feud with Drake. That drove eyes. Like it's quite phenomenal what hip hop can do. And we really want to get people thinking like that. So it isn't always about the big bucks, right? It's about one strategic move within one channel, right in the heart of the people that you want to talk to. And the ripple effect of that could be insane. So we want to take people on that journey and move people away from this, oh, let's do a TikTok. TikTok is one thing. It should not be the channel that all marketing strategies are now pinned on, because, they're having fast growth. Facebook had that previously. So for us, it's really living these values of hype, demand, and legacy, and everything that we do having a really, really, really clear cultural lens and focus, and just creating cool campaigns. We always say, like, we just like creating cool shit. Like it really is that simple.
Henry and I, we started this podcast because we like to talk about creative briefs. And Henry's a strategist and a planner at Zuby, and I'm a copywriter, and I've written a couple of books on the brief, and I teach workshops on the brief. And something caught my eye, something in addition to all the stuff I've already mentioned to you in the interview that I read about you, something else caught my eyes, because you were talking about the brief. And you also, earlier in our conversation, were talking about how you would kind of grab a brief and basically tear it up. Mm-hmm. So, I want to turn I just kind of refocus just for a second here, because we like to come back to the brief and talk about it. You have a slightly different kind of an operating situation with a marketing entertainment agency, but you still have a brief. So talk for a minute about what this document is like, or what the process is like for you when you put together a brief, and how often do you feel the need to come in and blow up that brief because you didn't like what you found? Do you write the brief, or do you review the brief? Tell us how that works in your agency.
So most briefs come to me first and foremost. I'm the main sort of driver in new business in the agency. And
who writes the brief? Do you have a strategist? Do you have someone who's assigned to do that, or how does that work?
So sorry, I'm talking about the brief that we get from clients to go back and pitch for.
Okay.
So the client has normally written it for whatever brand it is, and we get it, and I will normally skim read it because I'm just one of those people, and I know very quickly like whether that shit is going to be the right thing or not. I'll then normally send a WhatsApp to my business team and say, yo, no, we're not doing this. Go back to them and say, can we rework this? Most people say yes, because I think that there's an ultimate thing that most people do want to learn, and you only know what you know. My job is to be across so many things all the time, so I'm always ahead of everybody else. If you're that person, that brand manager in that brand with the same people every day that look like you, talk like you, everything else, you see one brief, right? You see one problem, and you're all looking at it through the same lens. The brilliant thing about TFR is I'm never looking at it through the same lens as that brand manager. And most brand managers that I've sort of spent time with are open to a conversation. So I will normally start to make scribble notes on the brief, and then I will pull out, say, 3 things that I think are their actual challenges. I'll normally do a quick audit of all of their social and digital presence. If it's a bar or a restaurant, I'll go and eat, drink, do whatever I need to do in it, get a bit of an understanding of who they currently have in venue, in restaurant. And then that will sort of all come together with the things that I naturally know because of the things that I read and observe as a marketer or communicator on a daily basis. And I'll normally come back with something that is an answer for it. And it all starts with the person, right? We have this thing in TFR where we look at value graphics. So value graphics is a step away. So it's a person's belief system, for the simple reason that the digital world made everything smaller. And it isn't about anymore going, oh, we want 25 to 34-year-olds with high disposable income that live in this group, that are female, that are this, that, and the other, because we're blended now. That way of thinking about people in that insular is wrong. So that's normally the first bit on the brief that's completely wrong, because I'm going, you don't know your customer actually as it goes, because they don't operate in the same boxes.
Plus those descriptions, it's as if that there's, when they say it's women 18 to 35 or whatever, there's a whole lot of assumptions about what women 18 to 35 are and what they like and what they do, which is who's to say what women 18 to 30, now you can go in and find out, like, what are attitudinally people that use our brand like, what do they think is cool and what do they don't think is cool. That to me is a lot more valuable than some demographic description or some, put them in a box in which we're all making assumptions about what that is.
Yeah. And that's the first bit of the brief that I rip out. I'm like, this is nonsense. This isn't real. This is kind of old school fictional stuff.
Do you delegate any of this, or do you do it all yourself?
No, my business team worked with me on this. And actually we've, over the last sort of 6 to 9 months, we've got I used to do them. I used to write every proposal. I would sit up and work through the night to get all of them done. But over the last 6 to 9 months, that's definitely changed, as we've sort of got everybody up in the business to a certain level of how we want them to look at it. 9 times out of 10, it comes down to my strategy and approach, but the team will put together the deck and the presentation. I will go over it from a visual perspective, but it's all about, our briefs, our responses to briefs, should I say, don't necessarily look like what they are, that flow of hype, demand, and legacy. How we pitch it, how we present it. Like I wrote a LinkedIn post the other day about, sorry, I didn't realize my Slack was on. Where I wrote a LinkedIn post the other day about, how you pitch. And it was like that's when you get the brief, when you get the brief in, like that's the first thing that you need to look at is, how are we going to entertain these people to get them to buy? Because a brief is essentially just words on a paper, right? Marketing, campaigns, communications is showing somebody how you take that to market. So we've done pitches where we've had CEOs on space hoppers doing space hopper races down Shoreditch High Street. We've had them in wrestling suits when we were pitching for an Olympics thing, making them fight them out. We did a pitch a few weeks ago that was for this venue in London that we call the Home of Culture. And we got bespoke cakes made that had the faces of all of the iconic people on them that performed there. We took in red cups and champagne and we said, we're here to give you a show, because that's what you're there to do for your customers, right? So when we look at a brief, these are all the bits that we're kind of pulling out and sort of wading our way through as to how we go back with a response, when most other agencies are looking to respond, not to listen, whereas we're listening and we're saying to the client, you're not listening to your actual customer. So it's a bit of a different process.
I want to jump in here, Charlotte, because I'm going to make an assumption that you're actually getting something from your clients that you can actually work with. I mean, Henry and I talk about this a lot, where we say sometimes when we get something from the client, which you would call a brief or a client brief, it's a Post-it note.
Yeah,
you know, it's like it's like that's, or they'll send you
usually it's War and Peace. Actually, it's 1,000 pages.
Or the opposite of that. Exactly. Yeah. It's like, and you have to wade through it to sort of figure out, is there anything here to begin with? Or they just is it a CYA document?
A lot of numbers, a lot of jargon, a lot of you know, and research that nobody like culled through to say, okay, we did this expensive long-term research study. Here's what it told us.
And this is where,
what do you get? What do you get from your client? Do you ask them to fill out something for you, or do they send you?
It varies. Sometimes I get a phone call, sometimes I get a full doc, sometimes I get a WhatsApp, but there are principles to this that remain the same. And Samantha Jones said it best in Sex and the City. First you get the gays, then you get the girls, then you get the industry. And if you can apply that, whichever spot you're going to, of who needs to come first, the principles of the ecosystem remain the same. It's actually not that complicated. Brands make it more complicated than it needs to be. How do I sell this? That's it. Right? That's actually all the brief should be. That's all it should say. And that's what we always bring it back to, because that is,
we've talked to Paul Feldwick. I don't know if you know who Paul Feldwick is. He's actually British, and he's written a book. He's written a couple of books. The one that we talked about with him is called The Anatomy of Humbug. And essentially he along with Byron Sharp, who's a marketer that you may have heard of, talks about entertain us. Communication should come down to answering the question, can you entertain me with your brand? Mm-hmm. And if you can entertain me, if we as marketers or communication professionals can make you famous, you're going to remember us.
Yeah, it's the fame model, right? So like Feldwick's position is, over the decades, we've had all these different theories of how advertising works. And in the beginning, it was very much like a sales pitch, like what a door-to-door salesman would give you only in a print ad or in a radio ad or in a TV ad. And that has evolved over time, although it hasn't been fully accepted by everyone. Then there was the unique selling proposition and all that. And he basically says really, when you look in history, the best advertising is advertising that entertains, because entertainment makes you famous. It makes you a celebrity. Yeah. So that's basically, his other book is Why Does the Peddler Sing? And the reason the peddler sings is because it entertains and it gets your attention.
Yeah. And it sounds to me like what in your story is about, whether you knew what you were doing, that this was what you were following or not, but you found this place where, we've got to entertain. We've got to make our brands famous in a way that fits the model of what you're trying to do. It's about entertainment.
And that still comes back to how hip hop stars did it when they had nothing. The boats, the champagne, they told a story. They told a bold story that stood out. And that's what's kept that ecosystem and that genre being where it is now. It's just taken new twists with, and we also have a thing internally where we call it the Yeezy effect. So if you think about what Kanye did with his Yeezy trainers, as to how that became the #1 shoe for Adidas, that is, Adidas. If you take that back to the moment in Madison Square Gardens, 1996, Run DMC, where he holds up his trainer and says, "My Adidas," that's gone on to be Adidas Originals, all of those things. That was that, right? That was fame in that moment. That was before social media, all of those things. And here we sit in 2022, and we've now just got an updated version of it via Yeezy and Kanye. The principles of that thread still remains what it was in 1996. Nothing changed.
Are you familiar with a Netflix series that ran in 2016, 2017 called The Get Down?
No.
It was the story of hip hop. It's how hip hop evolved in the mid 90s, told as a kind of a sort of a Romeo and Juliet love story. The star cast lovers, but there's a young black woman and a young Puerto Rican boy who's trying to find his way. He wants to be a DJ, and he hooks up with one of the three major hip hop players in that era in the 90s. And I'm kind of spacing on some of these names. Grandmaster Flash was one of the characters, but he wasn't the character. But anyway, it was a 2-season, 10 episodes per season that told this love story between this teenage couple. And in the background was this evolution of hip hop in New York City in the mid 90s. And there was this battle between the three major DJs of the day, the Grandmaster Flash and the two others whose names I can't think of right now. And it told the story. I ended up using that miniseries on Netflix in a composition class I taught. I had to use a novel, I had to use poetry, and I had to use drama. And the chair of my department gave me permission to use this TV show in place of Shakespeare. Right.
Love that.
So the kids are going to love this story, and they can actually watch it on Netflix. And if they don't have Netflix, we'll find a way. We'll find a way to cut corners. And that was part of my hip hop education. Truly, 6 years ago or so.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Are you in New York now, looking to find a permanent place to have your office here, or is this just something you're talking about?
Yeah, just something we've been bouncing around. This trip has been from LA last week to New York this week to Atlanta the next week. It's been very much around culture. It's been very much around, are we ahead of everything? Do we know what's coming through? Are we looking at everything really broadly? Have we experienced enough in the last 2 years to remain as sort of the thought leaders within this space? So this trip has been solely on like getting out, eating out, trying drinks, we've got exhibitions on tomorrow to go and see, and just really soaking in all of that New York cool that goes on to shape the rest of the world's cool over the next 5 years.
So what is your prognosis for, and I love the fact that you're not focusing on races. It's like, this is what you're doing to be a presence as a Black woman. But you are having an impact, and you're having a positive impact. What's your prognosis? Do you have hope for our industry? Do you have hope for, minorities in our industry?
So controversial. It's not the industry's responsibility to change this, right? We have a cultural problem where until we change the education system with minorities, particularly young Black kids, this won't change, because what we're trying to do at the moment is fix the problem at the top, right? Put in these silly quotas that will never be achieved because the talent pool just isn't coming through, because it's all influenced by what happens in primary school. And so for me, I don't believe that the industry can change. I think the industry can be more accommodating. I think it can be more empathetic. I think it can be more welcoming. But if we're talking about true legacy change that drives generational wealth, all of those things that minorities need, it starts in primary school. It starts with the 4-year-old little boy being told that he can do anything, that actually he doesn't have to be a footballer or a rapper. He can run an agency. He can be a CEO. That mindset from primary school is what shaped me and my siblings. It didn't start in adult, because we are a product of our childhood trauma in adulthood. So unless you deal with that at that low level, that age, and I've upset a few people with some of the things that I've said on this, because this D&I agenda at the moment is turned into very much tokenism. I sat on a call this week with a brand that said that's focused on sort of Black and minority people, big brand in the UK. And they said, so we started this music program. And I said to them, I can tell you that no Black or brown mother is saying, please let my child be a rapper. Please let them spend more time in a studio. That isn't the reality. What they're saying is, someone show my child how a contract works. Someone show my child how a P&L works. Someone show, that's what they actually need. So until we start to reshape that conversation and put confidence in these young boys from primary school, that they don't have to go down that route, and that actually you can get into any of these rooms, and we do work experience at a younger age. We put them in different situations to what maybe their home life will be. The industry won't change. We're putting a plaster at the top and blaming a lot of people that actually have just navigated through the world with the hand that they were given. That doesn't actually make somebody a bad person. But I know, you know, and also don't forget with D&I, a lot of people are making money off of that problem, you know, when actually we all know that that problem starts in school. It starts with what you're told to think about yourself. It does not start in the boardroom. That is the output of social conditioning actually in the boardroom. It starts from the age of 4.
Henry, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just, you know, I was going to say controversial things a lot of times are controversial because people don't want to hear hard truths. And I think a lot of what you said, you know, it occurred to me while you were speaking about, you know, I think President Obama had a quote about the soft bigotry of lowered expectations. And I think that that really is at the root of a lot of it. You know, it's about education and you know, I agree. You could create a quota system, but if you don't have the talent pool, then you're bringing less than talented people in to a position that's been reserved for them. And what is that going to do for the greater reputation of the group? It's actually going to do more damage than good.
Yeah, 100%. Sometimes I do wonder, Henry, if the system's been set up to deliberately do that, right? Because that keeps a certain people always in power and keeps other people always 1 foot behind. So I've actively turned down when people have asked me to come and do D&I talks and everything else. I'm like, no, because you're not going to like what I'm going to say. Because actually, if we start young, we will change it. If we keep going in, we can change a 30-year-old into this and this and get them into this new career path. You can't. By 30, you know who you are, you know what you believe, and you know where you're going. At 4 years old, you don't. You're being shaped.
Early on, I mentioned a couple of parallels between you and our founder also had a famous quote where she said, "I'm not a women's liber." And this is despite the fact that she was a very forward-thinking woman in a man's world. She said, "I'm not a woman's liber because liberation's up here." And she pointed to her head, you know. So I think it's a similar type of attitude that she had, and I, you know, fully respect it and agree with it. Easy for me to say I'm a man, but you know.
Well,
but you have to come to the conversation, right? This is the other part of this agenda where we're sort of saying, you know, we're not listening to white old men. I'm like, give me the white old men. Show me how you made your money, right? That's it. Show me the game. Show me the contracts. Show me the strategic moves that allowed you to become that multimillionaire. You are not my enemy.
It sounds like you, by taking that approach, you probably have befriended, engaged, and received the benefit of many of them simply by reaching out that olive branch, you know, instead of immediately assuming that these people don't care about you because of your skin color.
People, and that's the other thing, you know, with the media, it's been implied that, you know, all these men are bad. They're not, right? You've got a handful of dickheads. You know, most people in the world are good people who want to do right by others. They don't want to hold women back. They don't want to do those things. But circumstances that are shaped by society lead us into a way with the way that it's kind of been a man's world for so long. It was never just going to change overnight. It's to put this expectation on people that their whole behavior system can change. It does. That's not human. That's not how we operate, whether people want to hear that or not. That isn't the reality of the day to day. So I'm very much like with our storytelling of what we do as a business. I'm like, yo, let's go on a journey. Let's have a conversation. You ask me anything you want to ask me about being a Black woman or whatever. Let's chat. Like we're not going to move forward until we have those conversations.
I'm all about the bell curve. Like, I think so many things are represented by the bell curve. You have, you know, let's say we're talking about the behavior of human beings. There's at the very high end, there's people that are exemplary. Most people are within an acceptable realm. And then there are people that are despicable. That's going to be true of businessmen. It's also going to be true of the professionalism of police officers, of school teachers. Like, there's no hero job or thing that you confer on somebody doctors, right? Everybody reveres doctors. Well, not all doctors are equal. Some of them are outstanding. Most of them are passable within certain, and some of them are horrible and shouldn't be allowed to see patients. So I don't know why we get this idea of everything has to be something all the time.
Yeah. And we've made a certain group of dickheads famous, and that skewed everyone's perception because, but I also know that despite being Black, I've come from a relatively privileged background in the way that we were raised. So I always try and open up my empathy levels to make sure that I'm looking at it very, very broadly. And when I talk to young Black people, I talk to them about get off of Instagram, get on LinkedIn, right? You want to make connections, you want to talk to buyers, you want to get your new streetwear brand and Selfridges, whatever it is, go to where the business is, go to the virtual boardroom that is LinkedIn. Don't be fucking around with the nonsense on Instagram of people's 20 filters pretending to be something they're not. Take you and what you've got to LinkedIn and reach out to those people.
Once you've got your venture fully funded, then go to Instagram to get
Show
the
it
people
off.
to know about you.
Yeah, get the clout, but build on LinkedIn and then take it over. And we, again, with minorities, we're not trained about LinkedIn. Like most, white folk come out of university, they know about LinkedIn because that's a generational thing. Their dad will have a LinkedIn or their mum. But if you haven't been raised in that, you're just like, oh, that's a boring thing where there's loads of white people. That's not, again, that's something that, LinkedIn, go in and teach it in schools, go in and show young people how they can use that to be running their businesses and growing their businesses. And again, that's the conversation that isn't happening. Instead, we are shaming people.
Here in the US, we have a big problem with student debt. And I think a big part of that has to do with nobody trained these kids in high school how to run their own finances, how to, balance a checkbook. Hey, there's going to be all these loans available and they're going to be a low interest rate. But here's the problem. When you borrow $100,000, even if it's at a low interest rate, you're still going to owe $100,000. And that's a lot to work off.
Yeah.
And so we're not teaching kids basic skills. And I think it's certainly true in the US. It sounds like it might be true in the UK. And certainly I believe that in the schools that minorities tend to go to, because minorities tend to live in communities together, that's probably even a more acute problem.
Yeah, definitely.
Charlotte Mair, you are a wonderful guest. You are the founder and the managing director of your own agency called The Fitting Room, which you started with $25 in your pocket, and you built it into this wonderful organization that's keeping lots of people employed, that's doing great work for brands all across the country. And pretty soon, we hope, you're going to have an office here in the United States. Thank you, Charlotte, for joining Henry and me on The Brief Others. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach. Together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time. Bye-bye.